Welcome back. Something that was announced today, significant, a new what they call Strategic Response Fund, where the federal government is going to invest $5 billion through this fund. Melanie Joly is Minister of Industry and is on the line. Minister, thank you for joining me.
It's a pleasure, Aaron. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm happy to talk to you.
We're always happy to have you on. Let's start with this. $5 billion, that is an awful lot of money. How is this being invested? Do we have all the details on this? Do you announce those?
So the goal is to make sure that through this fund, we help the targeted industries that are affected by the tariffs. So that means steel, aluminum, auto also, and any other industries that could be affected. President Trump has referred to pharma and has referred to semiconductors. It's also fun to attract foreign direct investment. So what I mean by that is, for example, when we were able to track investments in Moderna, for example, and when they built the facility in Laval, that was at the time a fund that we used to make sure that we could attract investment. And we're still in conversation with many companies from European or Japanese or Korean companies to invest in Canada. So through that fund, we will be able to protect jobs and at the same time to create jobs. So it's a really big fund, like you were saying, but it's also very, very important to make sure that we're able to do just that.
I want to make sure I understand. So we know that part of Donald Trump's sort of mantra has been he wants companies to, build plants in the U.S. We're starting to see that. Some have made major announcements like that already. Is part of this exactly for that reason?
It's actually to make sure that we don't lose any form of companies, the major companies in the steel and aluminum sector, that they can continue to invest. A steel and aluminum plant, they have to work 24/7. You just can't stop the plant because from the moment you do that, you're basically you're not able to repower the plant just by clicking your fingers. So what you need to do is to make sure that they continue to operate 24/7, 365 days a year, but at the same time, the deal is you have to continue in investing in technology, in investing in what we say in accounting terms, CapEx, so capital expenditure. So basically, really continuing to invest in the future of the plant. And because of so much uncertainty is happening right now, because of the tariffs, a lot of these decisions regarding investments are on hold. And we can't let that happen. And so that's why that fund is also really important.
So I know we had economic job numbers out just a week or so ago. We lost 66,000 jobs in the last quarter. Many of them, I'm guessing, in sectors like you're mentioning, like steel and aluminum and auto. And I think a lot of Canadians look at this and think, you know what, this is going to get worse before it gets better because we have no indication from the U.S. that they're about to change their position on the tariffs. So does that remain the case? Are you expecting any kind of a change, any kind of a let-up here, or do we have a clue that that might happen?
So there's two things. Canadians expect us to be able to handle President Trump. And right now, we still have the best deal on earth because 85% of our exports are going tariff-free to the U.S. If you look at what the EU was able to do, the European Union, it's 15%. The UK, 10%. Japan, 15%. And even countries like India don't have a deal, but they have 50% tariffs against their entire economy. What has yet been done in terms of deal around the world is on steel and aluminum. And these are other types of tariffs. And all these countries, notwithstanding they have a deal with a basis tariff fee of 10 to 15%, they still have 50% of tariffs against their steel and aluminum industries like we do. So we're concentrating on trying to get a deal with the Americans on these sectors, particularly steel and aluminum. Of course, we're talking also about auto and lumber. But meanwhile, what Canadians expect us to do as well is to build one Canadian economy, to build Canada, because there are things we can't control, Aaron, but there are a lot of things we can control. And that's what we're doing right now. We're coming up with the names of the different major national projects that we pass our legislation to make sure that we could really fast-track approval for these important projects. In Montreal, for example, we're looking at the Port of Montreal and also the high-speed rail between Windsor and Quebec. We're also investing more in defense, and we're coming up with a defense industrial strategy to invest the money we're giving to the armed forces, but also into our companies at home, may it be the Bombardier, the CAE, the companies that are in the aerospace sector or in the space sector or even in the automobile sector. And at the same time, we are putting on the table a Buy Canadian policy to make sure that we're using our own procurement policy, so to make sure ultimately that Canada is the best customer of the government. So these are all different ways to create a form of economic power to counter everything that is going on in the U.S. and that is affecting us.
I want to bring up one other thing that we never really talked much about when all these tariffs were happening, right? And I understand that auto, steel, and aluminum are the big ones because they employ thousands of people in the country. A week ago, we lost a de minimis exemption, right? And all I started seeing and hearing was small companies in this country saying, based on this now, they may either have to close their business or modify the way they do business. And this affects a lot of small businesses across the country. Does the government have anything in plan or in place to deal with those affected by de minimis?
Yes. So we announced two initiatives as well. One of which is the BDC will be able to offer liquidity support to companies up to $5 million. So that's a lot of money. It used to be maximum $2 million. And the other thing is our regional development agencies will be able to offer also funding to help for the companies that want to invest even more in their own companies with a part that is non-refundable. And in Quebec, the Regional Development Agency is called DEC, and this is how we've been able to support a lot of the SMEs. I think also what we need to work more on, which we've done our part at the federal level, but I really hope that Quebec can follow up and other jurisdictions as well across the country, is we want to make sure that we're investing in one Canadian economy, getting rid of the trade barriers between provinces. And I know a lot of small businesses have thought over the years that exporting to the U.S. was easier sometimes than exporting to other provinces in the country, but we have to do that more. At this point, since July 1st, we were able to lift any form of federal trade barriers between the federal and the provinces. So I really hope that can be also a new way for small businesses to be operating in the country.
Do we still have a team in Washington now negotiating on a regular basis or continuing to negotiate with the U.S. on these tariffs?
Of course. We have Kirsten Hellman, who's the negotiator-in-chief, who happens also to be our ambassador in Washington. Last week, the clerk of the Privy Council, Michael Sabia, was also there. And Dominique Leblanc and the chief of staff to the Prime Minister, Marc-André Blanchard, have been also going to Washington. So we're in constant contact indeed.
I'm curious how you reacted. We talked about this last week. There have been attacks on the government. Pierre Poilievre has gone out of his way to suggest that nothing has been going on despite all the promises. When you hear that, is it unfair to criticize this government for, as they say, nothing having done, given the fact that you still have people there trying to negotiate on a daily basis?
I think Poilievre is talking a big game and is not showing any action. And he has no credibility on the economy because basically his entire life was just being in the House of Commons. We're hitting the ground running. We came up with this new approach, which is basically laying down the foundation for a new industrial reality in the country. And we came up with this fund of $5 billion you were referring to, a new Buy Canada provision, support through the BDC and the regional development agencies for small businesses, and also we're continuing to negotiate. There are a lot of things that are happening. We've done that in a very, very fast manner, including passing a new legislation within 20 days, which was C5, which is to make sure that we're fast-tracking major national projects. we are in action mode. And so I think that Pierre Poilievre is trying to gain credibility by just being the one that is, criticizing. But fundamentally, we're going at a speed that I've rarely seen, and that we've seen, I think, the last time during COVID.
Okay, I would be remiss if I didn't ask, just as a final question. We talked a lot about the EV mandate and the fact that your government is pulling back the 2026 mandate, which would have been 20%, but then you're doing a 60-day review. This, there's been, I heard today, and since this was announced, there's been criticism from the environmental perspective on you not respecting, the original sort of emission mandates under Justin Trudeau. Where are we on this? I heard you say we're respecting the ultimate one for 2050, but what about between now and then?
Well, first and foremost, we believe in EVs. That's not the question. The question is, we were at 19% of all new vehicles sold in Canada at the end of last year were EVs. But then we lifted our subsidies, and subsidies at the federal level are not available anymore. Right. And we're at an 8%, rate right now for EVs being sold in Canada out of all the new vehicles. And that's an issue. And meanwhile, when companies are not complying with that 20%, they have to pay. And they have to pay the government. And not only that, when they do so, they're already under 25% tariffs. So the auto industry right now is under huge stress, not because of EVs, but because of U.S. tariffs. And so it's our way to calm things down, make sure that they can deal with the liquidity. Meanwhile, we're looking at seeing a couple of things. First, how can we manufacture more EVs in the country? Second, is our EV mandate policy large enough to include certain models that are not included, that should be included? And third, how can we get more EVs from countries such as the ones part of the European Union or Korea or Japan that are cheaper than the ones also that are available? So that's why we're only taking 2 months, 60 days to work with the industry, work with environmentalist groups, find a way that is pragmatic. We can't fall into ideology. This is not the time to do so, but that ultimately we can go ahead and support the adoption of EVs across the country.
Okay. I said last question, but I lied. You mentioned South Korea and Japan, cheaper imports for electric vehicles. You didn't say China, and we know there's a situation where the Chinese, because of the 100% tariffs that we've imposed on them, have basically turned around and said, hey, you know what? We're not buying your canola anymore. Is there some kind of an idea to maybe bring the Chinese to the table, or is that just not going to happen?
Well, we have to look at the different aspects of and consequences of that. And there are a series of different considerations, including our negotiations with the U.S., the reality of our own auto sector in Canada, and ultimately affordability. These are all different considerations that we have to bear in mind. But let's be frank, we've invested in the EV battery sector. We put a lot of investments on the part of the federal government to build battery plants, particularly in St. Thomas, Ontario, in Bécancour, Quebec, and Windsor, Ontario. We believe that these were important investments, and we will follow through. And so we think that the future of cars in the country are the ones with low emissions. And we think that it's an important policy the government needs to continue to fight for.
Does that mean we're going to talk to China or not?
Of course, we'll continue to talk to China. As a former, the parliamentary secretary to the Prime Minister is in China as we speak, and we'll continue to engage with China. Okay. That's part of our policy. That's part of our Indo-Pacific strategy and China policy that we developed a couple of years ago, and that we'll continue to follow for sure.
All right, we will leave it at that. You give me more than the allotted time. I thank you very much.
I know. I have a tendency to do that, Aaron. So, hey.
That's my fault.
Thank you, guys.
My fault, not yours. Thank you so much.